what he calls an African continental government comes into force.
The African Union, which was to be Gaddafi's vehicle for the idea, ignored him when he was its chairman last year. Despite that, the Libyan leader used his country's vast oil wealth to influence some in the organization, spending billions of dollars on everything from aid, the military, humanitarian and infrastructure projects, to buying expensive gifts and building monuments dedicated to African leaders. Focusing on getting the poorest and most fragile states like Chad, Central African Republic and Niger to buy into his ideas and broaden his popularity. If he goes, the African Union will be seriously out of pocket. The organization released this statement on the crisis.
The AU condemns the disproportionate use of force against civilians and deeply deplores the many human lives lost so far.
If Gaddafi does go, will he be missed? Unlikely here in Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, where the Libyan leader recently called for the country to be broken up in order to quell religious violence, leading many Nigerians to dismiss him as mad.
There have been many inconsistencies in how Colonel Gaddafi has positioned the identity of Libya, either whether it's an Arab Islamic country or whether it's a black African country. And I think what he's tended to do is to play the game of a political chameleon, taking on a different shade depending on what is actually supportive of his own objectives, not necessarily in support of Africa or the Arab states.
While he may not be missed, Colonel Gaddafi is one of the last African leaders to remember a continent largely ruled by Europeans. The famous winds of change brought that chapter to a close. And whatever the outcome of this crisis, Gaddafi's time as an influential figure in Africa has almost certainly closed as well. Yvonne Dege, AlJazeera, Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's now look at what the unrest in Libya is doing to Libya's oil production. Now, Libya is in fact Africa's third largest oil producer. Its output has dropped by around a quarter. That's according to the Reuters news agency, with foreign companies shutting down operations because of the unrest going on in the country. As a result, oil prices are rising. Future contracts for the benchmark Brent crude went over $107 a barrel, and that was on Wednesday. It follows a two-year high, peaking at $108 on Monday. And since the Tunisian president was overthrown in January, on January the 14th, rather, oil prices have risen by $10. So an upward trend we're seeing there in the oil market. Steve Levine is the author of The Oil and the Glory. He's also a contributing editor to the Foreign Policy magazine and joins us live from Washington, D.C. Welcome to Al Jazeera. Steve, how significant is it that a quarter of Libya's oil production is now offline?
It's a very significant development. Actually, the facts are pretty sketchy. There's the detail that you just expressed. 25%. There's another report that it's up to 50%. This is, it's 800,000 barrels a day. That does have an impact on global oil prices. The question right now that everyone will be asking is, will Saudi Arabia, which has the most spare capacity at hand, will it make up that volume?
And will Saudi Arabia make up that volume if need be?
Right, that's exactly the question. The reason that oil prices are so volatile right now is not necessarily because traders are looking at Libya. It's because they're looking at Saudi Arabia. There is some uncertainty. There's some concern about, one, whether unrest will spread into Saudi Arabia's eastern province. That's where most of its oil is. And second, whether Saudi Arabia can compensate for any volume of oil that is shut down in Libya.
But it's not only volume, is it, Steve? Because isn't the grade and the quality of Saudi oil different from that of Libya's?
Yes. Libyan oil is of a very high quality. It's very light and can be produced very easily into gasoline, whereas the oil that will be exchanged for it, that will be substituted for it in Saudi, is a heavier oil. It's a sour oil. It's not anywhere near the quality of the Libyan oil.
So the concept then of this barrel for barrel replacement is effectively incorrect?
Well, it's incorrect, but still, in my own view, that's quibbling. It's still oil. It means that, again, traders who are gambling really on uncertainty, the uncertainty in the market, if there is another volume of oil on the market, refineries can still handle it. There will be enough oil to make up for, to serve the market.
Okay, well, let's talk about the price of oil for a second, because we're seeing now oil trading at around $107 a barrel. That's where it's hovering. At what price do you think would an OPEC member, whether it be Saudi Arabia or another one, start to pump more oil into the market?
They haven't given any indication at all. We haven't heard from Saudi Arabia, which would be the most influential player. Look, I expect this uncertainty to go on for some time. Oil, the Brent crude, the one that's traded in Europe, it actually went over $110. Maybe they'll act if it goes up to 120. The thing about it is that there is plenty of oil on the world market. There is not a shortage. OPEC, Saudi Arabia are not going to react until they see that there is an actual shortage.
Okay, and how likely is it, you think, that we'll see the entire production of Libyan oil turn off? We heard that threat, in fact, from Saif Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi's son.
Yeah, I think there's a high probability that the whole volume will be shut down. Libya has declared force majeure. And in history, when any country has declared force majeure, in almost every case, all of the volume has been shut down. That would be a loss to the world market of about 1.1 million barrels a day. I think that's going to happen. I also, as I was saying, I think that this volatility, the price volatility, will go on for some time. The U.S. crude went over $100 a barrel for the first time since 2008. The Brent went over 110. We're looking at a situation, if this volatility keeps going on, this chaos, if we see any kind of unrest in Saudi Arabia, I think you're looking at a 2008 situation where, as you know, oil ended up going all the way up almost to $150 a barrel.
Yeah, and what we know is that markets don't like uncertainty, whether it be oil or other markets. But Steve Levine, thank you very much for talking to us on Al Jazeera.
Thanks for having me.
Let's bring you other news now, and rescue efforts are continuing in New Zealand, where hundreds of people are still missing following Tuesday's earthquake in Christchurch. But hopes of finding any more survivors are now fading. There have been more than 100 aftershocks, and parts of the hospital remain closed. Here's Andrew Thomas.
The rescue efforts continue, but with each passing hour, hopes fade. Here, where there stood a 6-story building containing a TV station and a language school, now just smouldering rubble. There's no chance any more people can be pulled alive from here.